But when you give old people the ability to be old with a rule, they're going to be old. And that's exactly what these old refs are doing.
Props to Sean Payton. Formerly,
cheers,
Sean. He was in Nashville last week, and there was like almost a baton handoff where Sean Payton is no longer a part of the competition committee. Mike Vrabel, meanwhile, is the Titans head coach. And Sean Payton was on Dan Patrick earlier this week and said, look, the taunting penalty across the league, it has been over-officiated. It was not what we're seeing is not what they voted in, or at least not what they expected to vote in.
Not what they were talking about.
Yes. In the spirit of the rule, it has definitely overflowed with more penalties than what the competition committee expected behind closed doors. That's the first time I've heard that from anyone on the competition committee or anyone that's a head coach currently in the NFL. So props to Sean Payton.
This is the common
for actually
sense,
saying what everyone is saying.
Yes, a common sense answer that all of us are saying. Why is nobody saying this? Okay, if you want, what did he say? He said we were talking about, guys standing with their crotch over a guy's face.
Yeah, he said, I think it's being over-officiated. I sat in on the discussions. I don't think any of us who discussed it saw where it is now. Then he goes on to say that they were trying to eliminate players standing over opponents or crawling over players with their crotch by establishing a bright line that everyone agreed was taunting.
I'm on board with the bright line. I have no problem with the bright line. I understand not wanting that to trickle down to kids. Jeff Fisher, we might talk about this with. He'll talk about how the celebration thing was that. They didn't want it overboard, so you don't drive by a peewee field
and guess what's back?
See the kids making a circle and doing an explosion.
And guess what's back?
They went too far with that, and they got off of it.
And now they're back to it. You can celebrate all you want to now.
It served its time, so now they've moved to taunting. I don't have a problem with the taunting rule as intended, like Sean Payton's talking about. I do have a huge problem with it, as all of America does, with the way it's being enforced.
Well, I think Sean Payton, it was very reasonable in his assessment of it, where he didn't completely dump on the league,
right,
and the reasoning behind it, saying, here's what we talked about, the crotch shots, standing over people, pushing yourself off of someone to get up, those things. But this was such a reasonable explanation for something that we've all seen, and we're sitting here saying amen, because finally someone in the league that has a little bit of power said something about it. And he's spot on right. They've taken it too far. If you give them an inch, they'll want a mile.
And they can't admit they're wrong.
And it's also,
they can't admit they're wrong.
You're asking a bunch of old dudes to legislate something that this is not holding that they're trying to find. Right?
Right.
I mean, Tony Correnti is of a generation that what Cassius Marsh was doing is uncalled for. In his generation, he's thinking back to his high school coach would have ripped a knot in his backside and pulled him out of the game for that. So when he's sitting there staring the guy down, he's looking at it from a different perspective. And then Sean Payton is saying, here's what we discussed. This is what we want to weed out of the game. And they've taken it a step too far. But when you give old people the ability to be old with a rule, they're going to be old. And that's exactly what these old refs are doing.
And they need to be redirected, like you're talking about the old, but they need to be redirected like a child. You take them and right? Chad, you've got the young kids. You take her
but here's the problem.
And you refocus her on something else. And Park Avenue's not doing that. That's where the major failure
But
is.
people want to point out, what happened in Knoxville in the Ole Miss game and the fans and what happened at Texas Tech and all of this. And the root problem of this is the officiating. And no one's taking these officials aside like a child, Paul, in doing this.
That's what should be done.
Because for whatever reason, they are a protected class.
They really are.
They are protected citizens. We can't say their names. We can't call them out. They can't be held accountable. They can't do interviews. None of this is possible. And the people in power, conference commissioners, NFL commissioner, and many times coaches, they're allowing all this to happen. Because they're not holding their feet to the fire. They're not holding them accountable. And that's the root cause for some bad fan behavior, for things like we saw with the whole issue with taunting in the Bears-Pittsburgh game. And these are issues that aren't going away until officiating gets better.
I've got a story I need to share with you guys, and we'll get into this more. But it's the tip of the iceberg, not to rely on a cliche, about gambling and about fixing. 17 games is not a lot. Every game is hugely important. One penalty lets a team keep the ball when it should be punting. It changes the result of one game. That one game has an influence on who makes the playoffs and who doesn't. It changes somebody's bank account in a big way. There's going to come, sooner rather than later, accusations that something big is going on here that's connected. And it doesn't have to be connected to Vegas anymore. It could be connected to somebody's damn phone.
Or the mob.
I'm with you, Paul. I preferred the days of the mob. Right?
It was shadier.
Well, yes. There's
It's above ground.
I also think that it's so out there that it lessens the problems in a way.
It was already happening.
Yeah, it was already happening, but I'm saying now, once you take something from the dark web and put it in light, it becomes less appealing for many, and then the rule breakers within it, it's less appealing.
Oh, I think it's easier, more appealing. Go do it now. It's harder to get in trouble because everybody's betting, right?
Everyone's betting, but
To an
not
extent,
everyone is
yeah.
Tim Donaghy. Tim Donaghy was in the era prior to online sports betting. He's already served a prison's term.
You say perception is reality all the time. The more these happen, the more perception there's going to
we
be.
could scream from the rooftops it was happening, and now all these leagues are saying, yeah, it was happening. Might as well get paid to do it. And so they're getting paid through these gambling companies to do it. That's all this is.
Paul's seeing a lot
that's
of,
also
I'm
the perception.
I'm saying there could come a lack of faith in the reliability of results from these leagues coming.
Paul sees a lot of people like the Chevy Chase is the doctor in Dirty Work, owes his money to the mob.
Lose a finger.